Today we're going to be taking a quick look at the Asus ROG Falchion Ace HFX. They gotta work on these names, man. It is better than the modern names though. ROG Falchion Ace HFX for Hall effect switches. This thing is a Hall effect keyboard, has dual ports, 8,000 hertz polling rate, and fantastic build quality. Not to mention the features are absolutely top tier. Let's get into it. But this thing is actually a huge value proposition, especially against other things we've looked at in the past, like the Pulsar X board. That thing was one of my favorite keyboards to come out this year. And this is basically a 65% version of that, but better in a lot of ways. A couple of manuals, the USB-C cable. Also, I would recommend using this or a non-coil cable to get the 8,000 hertz polling rate working on this keyboard in its best capacity. I've gotten it to work with coil cables like I'm using right now, one from Space Cables. But if you want the absolute best, fastest, most consistent experience, I would recommend just plugging this in directly to your PC and not using a coil cable that's extra long. We have an additional control button because, as you guys can see, it has the Windows Copilot key. So that's cool for all the AI goodness. A keycap puller, and we also have a dust cover / keyboard case. And then you can also kind of use this as a deck to rest your keyboard into if you want just a little bit more height from the board. So just so you guys know, I have the RGB on in its brightest state right now. When you have it in its brightest state, you have to disable the analog effects. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the analog effects, which basically when you tap on a key, it brightens up the area around it. It significantly dims the RGB brightness, but obviously so you get that nicer effect. So quick tour around the keyboard. We have our double shot PBT keycaps up top, and then for the switches, we have the ROG HFX magnetic switches that take 40 grams of initial force, 55 grams of total force, and they are pre-lubed. The stabilizers are pre-lubed as well. We're going to be doing a sound test here shortly. And then coming around the back, we have our 3 levels of height adjustability. So we have your standard flat, and you have your first kickstand and your second kickstand as well, for a total of 3. And like I said, you can also set this inside of the base. This is where the fun happens. So you have a button to quickly switch what you want the touchpad to do. So you have media, keyboard brightness, profiles, macros, and volume. Media, let's go ahead and change this to the brightness of the keyboard. And then here is your touchpad right here. So you're gonna swipe left or right on your touchpad, and then you have your switcher right here, which is going to control switching between your number 2 and number 1 USB spots. Depending on if you prefer to have your USB on either side, you can do that, but if you have more than one PC, you can connect both of them and switch with this super easy switcher. It does take a second, obviously, for it to reconnect. Not really the end of the world. So it beats using 2 keyboards and taking up space on your desk. Now you also have this switch right here that you can go between the normal keystroke mode and the rapid trigger mode. So when the rapid trigger mode is on, nice LED indicator right there, and it's a super smooth switch. So when you're gaming, rapid trigger on. When you're typing, rapid trigger off, just to make sure you get the most accurate type so you don't get any misclicks. So that's quite nice as well. And that is pretty much it for the external build quality of this keyboard. Talking about the inside of the keyboard, you got 3 layers of foam, which is quite nice. Not something that you see on your average gaming keyboard, but for a gaming keyboard that costs $200, I would definitely want to see some additional foam to increase the quality experience of your end user. And I definitely think that they did a pretty good job, because stock, I think that this keyboard sounds better than a Wooting 60HE. And quite frankly, it sounds pretty close to my modded Wooting 60HE as well, for also being significantly cheaper. Mind you, the Wooting case is a little expensive and the keyboard is a little bit expensive as well, but this has 8,000 hertz polling rate, and the Wooting 60 is a little bit of a smaller keyboard and only 1000 hertz polling rate. But I know they got their own tricks up their sleeve as well. But this is pretty darn good, if not a little bit better. In terms of the gaming performance, when you really boil it down and start to measure the input latency and whatnot, these keyboards are getting so fast that it really doesn't matter about the nanoseconds that it pretty much is between key presses between 1000 hertz all the way up to 8000 hertz with a rapid trigger and the snappy tap and all that stuff. Like they have so many features. They're so fast, blazing fast, in fact, that doesn't really matter. Yes, it does matter. And that's why we're here, because you want the absolute best. I think this is an absolutely fantastic keyboard. No issues, no qualms, absolutely nothing. You buy it, it's done. As long as you like having a black keyboard theme, you're pretty much good to go. I would like them to come out with a white version of this. That would be fantastic, just to match a little bit more setups. But the RGB is really nice. The touchpad is super handy. 65%, so you don't have to mess with anything weird in terms of like doing your shortcuts and layers and all that stuff. Like you just have your arrow keys there. And of course you can set layers, but you don't really have to. Keyboard switches themselves are very high quality. Polycarbonate top, palm stem, and palm bottom as well, and pre-lube with the Hall effect sensors that you can change your various actuation points. Again, to get the most performance, I think they absolutely killed it.